off doing their normal thing, and they might not just hang around on the computer for 5 hours and talk about it. I might be an exception in the sense that I love computers and I spend a lot of time on computers. My job is in computers. I work in IT. So maybe because from the beginning I was always, like I told you, after I saw the movie, I thought I'm going to research this and research that. Maybe there's not a lot of people that want to do that necessarily, depending on if they're a female or whatever the case. So that in and of itself might have an effect on how many people are aware of it and what kind of time they spend. Maybe there's a lot of women that are aware of it, but that just aren't activists in the movement, because maybe they don't spend as much time doing the same kinds of things that we do. Like you're doing a show right now. There might not be a lot of women that do that or that into that kind of thing. So I think that's definitely a major part of it. I haven't been the only one to think that. I think I was even just talking to Neil about it recently, and he said that he'd mentioned something like that, I think, on one of his shows that I think he was talking to Aaron. That's right. And he was saying he doesn't know a lot of female activists. Aaron being Storm Clouds Gathering, he doesn't know a lot of female activists, and it's probably for the same reason that they just don't typically. I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, maybe, but I don't think they spend as much time online. And that's where a lot of our outspokenness and just sharing information and exposing things and all of that stuff typically happens, because it's free to us and it's available to us and it's not controlled like mainstream media.
Yeah. So, I mean, with this kind of thing in mind, how would you say that that coming across the movement as a whole and coming across the Venus Project, how would you say that it's changed your worldview, as it were?
That's a tough one because there's so many, aspects of it, obviously. I guess the best way to answer that would be just to say that you go through phases of it changing your life in different ways. I mean, the first way is that you just feel completely disillusioned. And I actually went through a few periods when I first started my channel with the Venus Project where I felt completely delusional. I felt like there was something wrong with me. I lived with roommates at the time in California, and I would just spend hours on my computer doing Venus Project stuff. And then I'd come out of my room and sit on the couch and kind of like they'd be watching something on the big screen TV. And so I'd sit down and just be watching it with them. And I remember one day in particular, I sat down and I was staring at this big screen TV, and they were, I don't know, drinking beer. I think it was a weekend. They were going to have a party. There was just things going on, and it just hit me, and I felt so discouraged. I thought, what are you doing? Are you serious? Like you're in your room advocating this thing, and then you come out here and this is real life. Like, I don't know what you've been doing or thinking, but this is real life. Like, this is what's actually going on. We're never going to do a Venus Project. Like, just stop. You were almost like part of a cult. You need to like calm down with all that.
Yeah.
And that's how it hit me, if I'm just being completely honest. But it was just a phase, because what happened was I started to learn that I can see how it would be so easy to get discouraged when you don't know enough. You don't have enough information. All you know is what you've read about the Venus Project. And so you're thinking, oh, wow, this is kind of just a pipe dream, and this out here is real life. It's not until you start to stumble upon all these other organizations, you start to listen to some more Carl Sagan, you start to really listen to Jacques Fresco's lectures and what he's talking about. You get some more research from stuff that Peter's been talking about, you read some more books, you go through history, you look at science and the advent of technology. Federico's over here talking about technological unemployment. You start to learn more about just technology in and of itself and how it can free humankind, and you open up your mind and start to realize, wait a minute, this isn't a hop, skip, and a jump. This is a process. And when I start to learn facts and information that make this sound completely viable, now I don't feel so crazy anymore. You see? So that's kind of how it changed my life. I know it made me hungry for more information. I was actually telling Peter over when we were in LA for Z-Day, I was telling him, I feel like I've gotten more education in just, the last couple of years advocating this direction than I ever did when I was in college. Because I'm motivated. I'm motivated. I'll pick up a book and I'll read it just because I want to, not because somebody told me to and I'm going to have a test.
Yeah. Because it's self-education. You pilot and guide yourself, and that, that's the,
that's true.
It's just like with any kind of, motivation, something that you do for a hobby, you're far better at because you're doing it because you enjoy it, because it's fun. You're not doing it because you feel you have to. You know,
Right.
that's what makes it so much better. But just going back quickly to the feeling of, alienation, I don't know whether you went through this sort of process as well, but I definitely went through it. That I think it was like the first 6 months or so after first encountering this train of thought, a lot of my friends did actually say that I was preaching. And at the time I said, no, I disregarded the idea of preaching, but I think I actually was, because I was, to begin with, because there was that initial shock of coming across this information, and, the feeling of frustration, that why isn't this a reality right now? Why have I been born into this world at this point where it's been allowed to get this bad? And you start getting that Howard Beale sort of thing. I'm a human being, God damn it.
Yeah, right.
And that comes across in your, I came across in my communications, where I was telling people, why can't you see this? And a lot of people were right when they were saying that you're just preaching, you're being dogmatic. And, and I think to begin with, I was, I mean, did you find that sort of thing? Were you sort of letting your feelings get in the way a lot to begin with?
I think that I very conveniently avoided a situation like that, where I probably definitely would have fallen victim to that, because I'm like that. When I believe in something really strongly, or if I'm getting, sometimes I'll just have a debate about whatever topic with my dad, and we'll just go on for hours and hours. We can't even play a board game without me being like, no, you're wrong, you can't make that move, and here's why. And then we talk about it for 45 minutes. So that's probably exactly what would have happened to me if I hadn't driven all of that energy into my channel. I almost didn't spend any time talking to people about it in my everyday life. I told them what I was doing, and I think that actually had a different effect, see, because instead of preaching to them, I was just busy telling them what I was doing. That's all. I wasn't saying, you have to agree with me and you have to like my channel and the Venus Project, and don't you get it? It was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm doing this new channel thing, because I saw the Venus Project, and, oh, what is that? Well, it's a sustainability, organization, and they're trying to do this thing for the future. Oh, that sounds really cool. Trying to, end hunger and poverty. And okay, so you have a channel? Yeah, I'm going to do a radio show with this guy, Neil, he contacted me. And so people are more excited for you because you're not, well, I guess I should say me. They were more excited for me because I wasn't telling them about the stuff. I was just telling them what I was doing, and they thought that was cool. And so then I would just go over here and do something that I was doing. And most of my talking was with the online community and different people, and making friends and adding them to Facebook and doing YouTube comments and stuff. So I think I sort of safely avoided that, not on purpose, but just coincidentally, because I had something else going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that kind of approach, that does actually, it's far less abrasive to just simply, sort of briefly summarize what you're doing, not necessarily because I'm, for the vast majority of the time that I've been an activist for this, I've mostly centered on what I advocate and why, trying to, as briefly as I can, try and explain what the train of thought is and why, instead of saying, what I was doing. So I think that sort of approach does work far better.
Yeah, I think it satisfied that craving, that very thing that you were talking about, having to get the message out there to people, and why don't you get it? I think I was able to satisfy that by arguing with people on the internet, so I was able to say, why don't you get it? And talk to people online. And so when somebody in real life would come up to me, or no, I shouldn't say in real life, in my life, would talk to me or ask me a question, I was able to just leak information, whatever I felt they were comfortable with. And that's worked for me since day one. I tell people all the time that in the work environment, it's something I'm not entirely willing to just completely be open about, because you never know how people are going to react and how it's going to affect your job and stuff, unfortunately. And so a lot of times I just phrase it as simply as possible. I'll never forget at my last job that I had, where I was a contractor, one of the team leads, like one of my superiors, actually asked me, we were talking about something, I think recycling and being green, just we were talking about it in chat. And he said, so what is it that you do? You were saying you do some, volunteer work or activism or something. What are you saying do? And I just said, oh, I'm an activist for the post-scarcity and sustainability movement. And so then there was just kind of this weird pause, and he sent me this weird emoticon that looked really surprised, like, oh my God, you're going to be fired kind of thing, you know? And I saw the face and I thought, oh my God, I said too much. So I responded to him. I said, what? And he wrote back saying, you have far too many brains to be working on the help desk. So I thought, oh, that was a much better reaction than I expected. So sometimes
that's much better.
Yeah, sometimes just how you word it and what depending on the tone of the conversation and how much information you're willing to get into, it can have a really positive impact on people as opposed to just too much at once, oh, the zeitgeist movement and everything's a conspiracy and blah, 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 and the monetary system's a horrible thing and corporatism and animals are all dying and we're all going to go to hell. Then you're just kind of like,
dum, dum,
okay.
Dum.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you say that, the way you thought about, socioeconomics or geopolitics or anything like that, would you say that was vastly different before you became an activist, or would you say that you were more or less going along the same lines?
I would say that it was virtually non-existent before I became an activist. If I'm being honest, I've always hated politics, but not for the same reasons that I do now. I hated them because I didn't understand them and I didn't care to. I just thought this is all stuff going over my head. I don't know what they're talking about. It's got nothing to do with me. It's not interesting. It's all, just blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until something was put into terms I can understand that I thought, oh, okay, wait, now maybe I get why I never found it interesting, because it never actually does anything. Politics don't really, do anything really as far as changing the world. So when you start to understand that, you are interested in the sense that you like to dissect it more. That it doesn't mean that you're interested because now you think it's good or you think it works, but because you start to pinpoint different areas, different things that groups are doing or politicians are saying and what that means to you and what it's fixing or not fixing. It becomes more of a science to you or a way of looking at things in comparison to things like the zeitgeist movement and other organizations. But really before I was exposed to the Venus Project and I felt like there was just a possibility for a complete overhaul of our system, I wasn't really interested in politics or even activism in general. I knew that there was problems with the environment, but I didn't think there was really anything we could do about it besides being a member of PETA or something. You're so busy in your own life,
Yeah.
And you always feel like, what little bit you do isn't really going to do anything. So what's the point? Then when you maybe start to become open to an idea that, oh, wait a minute, I can do something that has a point. I'm not just going to do patchwork. I'm not just going to put a Band-Aid on this. I'm actually going to try to learn and understand something and figure out how this works. And, if we unite and there's a lot of us together, we can really make some big changes. And I think that's definitely more of a motivating factor to get into, social awareness and things like that.
Yeah, because I found my attitude towards politics and activism more or less was kind of the same thing. I mean, growing up as ever since I was a little kid, I've always been a fan of Michael Jackson and especially the song "Heal the World." And it's strange because when you mentioned patchwork, I immediately thought of the logo for Heal the World was basically just the earth and just a Band-Aid over it. So I kept thinking to myself, well, I kept thinking that is the way that we solve problems, to basically, let's all just come together. And, I always thought it was like there was this wish-washy thing that eventually we'll get there, but I have no idea how, because, politicians, they just talk all over my, so I completely agree that, what you say, I completely empathize with, but now, suffice it to say, I can't stand to watch any politicians talk because I just start ranting at the television or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. Justin and I have already inadvertently created a drinking game for watching politicians talk.
All right.
Whenever they say things like unemployment or something that's completely irrelevant in the resource-based economy.